Powered by the Montana Television Network. This is the 5:30 News on KPAX, Montana's news leader.
Good evening, I'm Jill Valley.
And I'm Dennis Bragg. Montana Rail Link says it could take several weeks before a coal train derailment northwest of Knoxon is completely cleaned up.
About 30 cars derailed Sunday night, spilling an unknown amount of coal along the banks and into the Clark Fork River along Highway 200. An MRL spokesperson says the rail company is working with state and federal agencies to ensure the cleanup is successful. They say very little coal spilled into the actual river, but they still don't know exactly how much that is. MRL says it is cooperating with the Federal Railroad Administration to investigate the derailment. No word yet on what caused it. Stage 2 fire restrictions went into effect in late July, but the Missoula County Fire Protection Association reports they're continuing to find campfires and charcoal fires out in the woods.
It's hard to believe. MTN's Don Fisher spoke with officials about what these restrictions mean as western Montana continues to deal with extreme fire danger.
Interagency wildland fire officials with the Missoula County Fire Protection Association are reminding folks that western Montana's Stage 2 fire restrictions remain necessary. Even though many communities received wetting rains on Sunday associated with the passage of a cold front, the amount and duration of the rain was not enough to significantly alter conditions on the ground. Chris Johnson with the Protection Agency says fire prevention is more important now than ever as fire danger remains extreme.
People don't have to look far out of their houses to see multiple columns going off. So any human-caused fire is going to cause another group of responders to put themselves into harm's way every single day. So one less fire, one less spark is one less time that responders have to roll to a scene and put themselves at risk.
Johnson says since Stage 2 restrictions were implemented on July 27th, nearly 30 campfires or charcoal fires have been discovered in areas where restrictions are in effect. Violations were discovered during nighttime and early morning patrols of area campgrounds and popular recreation sites. Johnson says firefighters in the area want to extend thanks to those who have paid attention to the restrictions and ask them to keep doing so as we close out the summer.
We're getting into a time right now with historically low dead fuel moistures. Things are snapping and cracking in the woods. Any fire right now that starts is going to be very difficult to contain. So it's up to all of us in western Montana to make sure that we're careful with any activity that we do that could create a spark.
In Missoula, Don Fisher, MTN News.
Johnson says liquid propane stoves or other types of stoves that can be turned on and off are allowed while restrictions are in place, but please make sure they're only used in areas cleared of flammable material at least 3 feet from the stove.
Missoula fire investigators say last night's grass fire in the Rattlesnake was human-caused. Missoula City firefighters were called to this 2-acre grass fire just after 8:45 last night near the Duncan Drive and Mountain View intersection. Flames were visible mid-slope of the hill above Duncan Drive when firefighters got there. Now, they contained this within an hour and nobody was hurt and no structures were damaged. Assistant Fire Chief Gordy Hughes says they've ruled out fireworks or a campfire as the cause. They're still investigating this one, though, and they're encouraging the public who may have witnessed the fire with any information to call 552-6210.
A man and his dog are recovering after the cabin they were staying in at the tourist store and campground exploded and went up in flames after a propane leak.
Missoula Rural Fire District Assistant Chief Paul Finley says the fire and explosion happened around 2 in the morning on Saturday. Crews found the cabin engulfed in flames when they got there. Initial reports indicated the guest had suffered major head injuries and was moved to the store before help arrived. He was later taken to the hospital. A dog hiding under the cabin was also burned and taken to a local vet. Chief Finley says it appears the propane was leaking behind the stove in the kitchen, and the explosion may have happened when the man woke up and lit a cigarette, which ignited the gas. That cabin is considered a total loss. You may have noticed a little more smoke in the air compared to yesterday. Looks like our air quality is going downhill from here. Here is Chief Meteorologist Erin Yost with more on that and her forecast. Erin.
Yeah, we're seeing a flow direction change, a sort of pattern change as we move into the next several days. High pressure will build back over the region, and we will definitely be dealing with some more really some poor air quality as we head into the next several days. Taking a look in Hamilton, this is our First Security Bank iCam. We are continuing with air qualities. More on the way.
In other news, some residents living near the Lolo Peak fire are back home this afternoon, but fire managers are warning everyone to remain alert as they brace for more dry weather and the potential for extreme fire behavior the second half of the week. Today, the Missoula County Sheriff's Office lifted the evacuation order for the lower section of Highway 12 along Lolo Creek from milepost 21.7 west to milepost 20. Those were among the people told to leave when the fire was very active over the weekend. The mandatory evacuation order remains in place near Fort Fizzle and west to Mill Creek Road in Elk Meadows on both sides of the highway. Portions of Mormon Creek Road above and including Van Drive remain under evacuation warnings. At a community meeting last night, the incident commander for the Lolo Peak Fire said while the cooler weather has been helpful, this isn't a time to become numb to the threat from the blaze. He says crews are concentrating on attacking the most active side of the fire on the South Fork of Lolo Creek using burnout operations and control lines to keep it from burning down into lower elevations.
What we want to try to do, in essence, is create a plug for fire to quit trying to come around that corner on us and move down the drainage. And there's some opportunities to get some line at least lower on the hill, albeit temporary.
That containment line, which was constructed shortly after the fire started last month, now encircles the fire to the west, north, and east using newly constructed shaded fire breaks and existing roads. The latest map showed the Lolo Peak Fire has now burned over 10,000 acres. The lightning-sparked Sprague Fire has now burned an estimated 100 acres in the heart of Glacier National Park. That fire is located on the west side of the park above Crystal Ford on the Gunside Trail. That's the main access trail to the Sperry Chalet. Park officials say that depending on fire behavior, the Sperry Chalet may remain closed for the rest of the season. The structures there are not immediately threatened by fire at the time. However, the park is ready to implement structural protection precautions as needed. Other fires within the park have been contained now or are being staffed. A fire was reported in the North Fork area of the park on Sunday. The Adair Peak Fire was burning in heavy duff in a remote area. For the latest on backcountry permits and trail closures in the park, you can check our website. Fire specialists expect today's dry and breezy conditions to fuel slight growth on the east side of the big Gibraltar Ridge fire burning near Eureka. That nearly 1,900-acre lightning spark fire is now 12% contained, following a few days of humidity and cooler weather. Crews continue efforts today to protect buildings while holding the fire along the Foothills Road east of Eureka. Tonight, firefighters will use an infrared camera to find heat sources and hot spots. Previously evacuated residents were allowed back home yesterday. They're required, though, to sign in and provide contact information at the checkpoints there at Lick Lake and receive a permit. Non-residents are not allowed in those closure areas. And we can't mention every fire on air, but you can find reports on all the fires burning in western Montana on our website. We continue to track all the details and the critical information you need with our Fire Watch coverage on air and online with our Facebook and Twitter feeds and on the KPAX mobile app.
Montana's Department of Higher Education says the University of Montana is following policy after about 40 lecturers were told their contracts may not be renewed in 2018. Deputy Commissioner of Higher Education Kevin McRae says it's part of ongoing efforts at UM to align faculty expenses with revenue. McRae says guidelines require cuts based on enrollment made to faculty that must begin with non-tenured track employees, and that none of the roughly 40 lecturers were eligible for tenure, something those employees were aware of at the time. McRae says those jobs are per semester contracts, and UM is required to provide at least one semester's notice before removing those positions. McRae says it comes down to enrollment numbers and revenue, and that non-renewal of contracts does not reflect on the lecturers themselves. We'll keep it here on KPAX. Aaron says we're about to see our temperatures go up again. We'll talk about how hot it will be.
Plus, you can't tell by looking at it, but the creator of this Montana-made furniture was self-taught. That story coming up in our Montana-made series after the break here on KPAX.